52. Among the people who were arrested was our leader and commander, Comrade Levi Lombard Mbata from Everton, who was part of the commanders who was accompanying the group to the borders with Botswana. He would have gone into Botswana, they dropped us.
All right, we seem to be struggling with that Zoom connection. We'll certainly try to get back to it, and we will also be having a chat after the former president, Jacob Zuma, speaks with Lesiba Tefu, who will take us through that speech, and also what may be and what's being seen or perceived as internal squabbles within the ANC regarding the former president being allowed to speak at the memorial service of Andrew Mlangeni. All right, so let's move on and certainly try to come back to the former president. The family of a 34-year-old Limpopo man who died in a car accident
an Afrikaans area. They did not know Afrikaans either. Partly, they came from the Eastern Cape to work in Cape Town, as I learned later. And therefore, this man was angry. He says, "You're magrasiso. More. Huh? He shall place on a cost 3 Maltese." Now, we did not understand what this man was saying, and I'm sure up to now I'm not saying it right. And there was an argument between the two leaders who knew Afrikaans. Mbata explained to us that we are being punished, that tomorrow there will be no food because we are making noise. In prison, we are not supposed to make noise. Mlangeni said, "Mfowethu, sorry." He used to call Mbata Mfowethu. We are making a mistake. He is just telling us, he's being good to us, he's telling us that what we've eaten now is our last meal, supper. We'll only eat tomorrow. But I said, no, he's saying tomorrow shall this day without, and they could not agree. Mlangeni said, "Mfowethu, I studied Afrikaans, I know it." But I said, "Comrade Mlangeni, this is prison Afrikaans. You won't understand it." And they couldn't agree. And then we all said, "Okay, let us hear tomorrow morning. Let us see what happens." Tomorrow morning, we went out to have our baths and clean our buckets because there were no toilets except the buckets that we had to clean ourselves every morning and afternoon, which means you would sit in the cell, do everything there, whilst other comrades are sitting. There was no alternative. Of course, we did not eat breakfast. So Mbata was proved right that this is prison Afrikaans. That was the beginning of a process. Now, it is absolutely important for us to understand that the arrest in 1963 was one of the big blow that the apartheid regime delivered to our struggle. As you would know, and I think it is important to underline this point even before I discuss how we shared and how we behaved in the cell with Comrade Isitwalandwe and Mlangeni. Clearly, the ANC, as it waged a struggle, Comrade Mlangeni belongs to those who came at the right time into the ANC, joining the ANC in the very beginning of the 1950s. It was when the ANC was changing from a stance of being an organization that is clear what it is looking for, determined to liberate the South African people at all costs, but wanting to do it in a manner that was reasonable, understandable, that everybody must feel part of a new country that is going to emerge. And I'm sure, comrades, you will recall that at the close of the 40s, the ANC Youth League, which had just emerged, had very clearly indicated that they cannot continue like the old leadership was. They wanted action. In their conference of 1949, took a decision to recommend a program of action to the mother body. And indeed, the mother body adopted that proposal from the ANC Youth League, which talked about the need to undertake a number of actions to move away from just statements. And one of the recommendations was the matter of undermining the racist laws, which was called the Defiance Campaign. In other words, that the oppressed must defy, must conduct a campaign where they defy the laws which were apartheid laws. They must not be respected as the laws of our country because they were meant to oppress the African people or the black people in general and African people in particular. It was this time that you saw people like Comrade Mlangeni coming into the fore. Comrade Mlangeni, who had been working and in the trade unions and had participated in the strikes in the company that he was working in, Padco company, and therefore he was already an activist. And therefore coming in as a young kind of league, part of that organization where they coined an expression that said freedom in our lifetime. And we joked with Comrade Mlangeni at times that Comrade Mlangeni, we introduced this during a time from the Youth League. Will freedom come during our time? And he said yes, and he was right. Freedom came during his time. But it is important that therefore, as Mlangeni came in, he became part of the volunteers and the volunteer corps. And therefore, the changing of the ANC, Mlangeni was part of it, and many other comrades. Comrades Thomas Nkovi, comrades like former Secretary General Afrenzo, and many. It was this time that shaped the ANC differently from other political parties, whether in the country or in the continent. Because it was this time that the ANC said, we need our freedom. And there was indeed a call which said, if you are talking about freedom, what type of freedom are you talking about? How do you define this freedom? Particularly after the Defiance Campaign, because the Defiance Campaign, among other things, as it was argued very vehemently by our leader, Utatu Madiba, arguing at some point with those who were forming what used to be called, who had formed what used to be called the Unity Movement, who were talking about the galvanization of the masses before you do anything. He was arguing that the masses must be galvanized by action. Can't just galvanize them by theoretical discussions only. The masses don't just discuss theory, but they must participate. And therefore the Defiance Campaign had been a planned thing to charter. And the ANC had reached a level where they felt it needed to define what type of freedom do we want. And once the ANC had all the material to do so, but the ANC took a decision that this is a struggle of the people. And therefore we need the people to participate in telling us as to what type of freedom do they want. Thus, therefore, the volunteers of the ANC, which included Comrade Mlangeni, had to undertake for the first time a door-to-door campaign, going from house to house, from factory to factory, asking people, what type of freedom do you want? All what was said by the people at all levels, the workers, the peasants, the intellectuals, the women, the youth, etc. Those complaints and suggestions were then put together into a charter, which was called the Freedom Charter, which then had to be adopted, to be discussed and adopted by a Congress, by a conference, by a huge conference for the first time in the country ever, called the Congress of the People, which began to say, when we talk of freedom, we are not just generalizing, but we are saying we are dealing with the freedom where there should be equality, because our country was ruled by a minority that was saying only them don't have the right. The Freedom Charter became our own direction and understanding where we're coming from. And this indicated that, therefore, talking about freedom was not just talking about freedom in general, but we're talking about freedom that you could define, you could specify. Mlangeni comes from that kind of situation. It is also important that it was as the regime realized that this kind of definition of freedom was against their own ideological thinking or whatever. They then conducted a big national arrest of leaders of the ANC and the alliance to charge them with high treason. So the situation had been changing in South Africa from just saying we need equality, we need freedom and everything. You reach a stage where we're saying we need freedom and this is what South Africa should look like. And they said these are communist ideas and charged the leadership. And it is absolutely important, therefore, to see the ANC changing from quantity to quality, even with quality, more quality, and higher levels. Because it is this time where the enemy said, we now have to arrest these people. It was burning leaders individually, burning the organization as well in 1960, and therefore saying, kill the struggle. At this time, the debate was, what do we do? Should we continue the old traditions of non-violent struggle, or should we declare the armed struggle? That is a debate I'm sure comrades could have, because there was an interesting debate that was debated within the ANC, within the alliance. The alliance, just to clarify this, the alliance then was the ANC, was the South African Indian Congress, was Colored People's Congress, was Congress of Democrats, and it was as well SACTU, the South African Congress now we are talking about, that was behind these discussions. And finally, a decision was taken after a long debates that yes, the time for armed struggle has come. And that led a military wing of the African National Congress, Umkhonto weSizwe, and therefore which meant the policy of the ANC changed. There was no longer a soft way of it. Was now we have declared war. An organization called Umkhonto Wesizwe had emerged because at the end of the debates, when the agreement was done, the president of the ANC, Inkosi Chief Albert Luthuli, as they were discussing the name, he said, you know, if we have been fighting somewhere, some people or somebody, and that somebody follows you to our own home, and once you get to our home, the weapon that you have in your house is a spear. And you have to defend your family and everything. And therefore, you take your spear. And he said, this was an analogy. We've reached a stage where we must now take our spear. And therefore, this organization that is going to be born must call it the spear of the nation. Umkhonto Wesizwe. Things have changed. I'm trying to indicate that when the arrest came in 1963, the times had changed in South Africa. Umkhonto had emerged in 1961, emerging with sabotage, wherein comrades like Mlangeni participated. But what is important to bear in mind is that Comrade Mlangeni, given the fact that they were your second layer leadership in Johannesburg and nationally, they were at the cutting edge of these changes. Mlangeni became one of the few, probably 5 or so, who were identified, including Comrade Joe Kabi among them, Raymond Saba, who were then a part of a group that was sent secretly out of to go and train in China. And nobody knew they had ever gone to China because the leadership, the high command, in order to start the armed struggle, you needed comrades who would have been militarily prepared to help participate in establishing MK and commanding the operations of MK in the country. And Mlangeni was one of them. And therefore, when these arrests were taking place, it was clear that they were trying to kill the armed struggle, our enemy. And once they arrested this group of 52, which comprised of cadres from all 4 provinces. And that's why the leaders were arrested. And that's why the enemy thought we must deal with the MK structures. You'll also recall that a year before 1963, 1962, our leader, the commander-in-chief of Umkhonto Wesizwe, Madiba, had been arrested after reporting of his trip that he had taken outside of the country. And he had been tried, convicted for 5 years. He was the first prisoner to be sent to Robben Island. So during this time, in 1963, when we were arrested, this big arrest I talked about arrested a number of our leaders, very top leaders. We're all brought to Pretoria. We were cadres, young cadres who were going out for military training when we were arrested in Groote Mariko near Zeerust. And then we had to serve our 90 days in Pretoria. That's why we met with Comrade Mlangeni. I just wanted to give this background that this happened. And of course, it was a bonus. Whilst we were in prison, we were happy to be arrested together with the leaders as young cadres of MK. And indeed, we got to know that Mlangeni was one of the leading cadres as we stayed in prison. A very gentleman-like comrade, very easy to go. He said, I need my cigarette here in the cell. And Levi Mbata, who had a bit of knowledge of what happens in prison, he said, look, in prison, you will have very difficult situation. He said, look, I'm not convicted. I need my cigarette. He knocked at the door. He called the warders and said, at the reception, I want to smoke. They said, but prisoners are not allowed to smoke. He fought to a point that he had to be taken out of the cell to be punished. And I realized this comrade is very brave. He was punished for it. And he was brought back for us to stay with him. A wonderful comrade. We spent a lot of time together as we were looking forward towards finishing our 90 days detention. He was an easy-go area, comrade. And I loved politics, to discuss politics even at that time. I thought I'm going to worry him. Also getting to know that he came from the unions, because I also came from the unions. So I said, we have time, let us discuss politics. So we had to discuss issue from issue to issue. And he was very helpful to help us understand politics. And I used to worry him because I suspected he must be a communist, just my suspicion. So I said, Comrade Mlangeni, can you give us a definition of a nation? What is a nation? At hey, mfanakit, hey, into abakhulu leyo Stalin, read Stalin's book, angafuni ukuyidiscussa, ngihlale ngimhlupha ngayo njalo nje. And we developed a friendship with Comrade Mlangeni, my leader. I used to refer to him, and for some reason until now, before his departure, whenever we met, I called him Reverend Mkwena. Why I called him Reverend Mkwena? As you heard, that as the ANC started the armed struggle, had to train cadres who would know how to operate underground, who would know how to enhance the ANC in the form of MK, the kind of activities. So he, Joe Gabi and others, as they came back from abroad, they were in the leadership of establishing MK and taking into account the recruitment, etc. They would receive people as they come to Joburg, take them across. They were part of that kind of structure. He used to go to, among others, to all provinces, but he went to the Free State wearing the attire of a priest, a pastor. Nanokololola Ekon. His name of this reverend was Reverend Mufukeng. And that was Andrew Mlangeni in disguise to people that who did not know him. And when the arrests came and people were beaten up and some were talking, some said, we met the Reverend Mkwena in the area where Comrade Caleb Msabe was staying, who was quite a hefty person. We saw him. The special branch arrested that Reverend Mkwena, thinking this was the man. And the man never knew nothing about the ANC, was just a reverend. But it happened that those who were being beaten up were saying, well, the person they met was Reverend Mkwena. He was put in the car, as we heard from Comrade Caleb Msabe. The two of them were put at the back, two big leaders, Caleb Msabe and this reverend.
Outsurance loves saving South Africans money on their car insurance. Let's meet some excited new clients who recently switched to Outsurance. Let's take a shot left Nana into a cheat day.
No problem.
You have a dream.
I want to be a bouncer and